Good evening, viewers. We thank God that we have another session tonight. We started last week on dealing with various values as a result of what empire builders have done in our nation, Nigeria, but we didn't quite complete. And so today, what I will do is that I will recap what we did last week so that we can conclude well. And after this, then we will now address the contemporary issues of insecurity, crisis, and conflict in Nigeria. What we have been doing so far, we have looked at the historical roots of insecurity in Nigeria, crisis in Nigeria, and conflicts, various conflicts in Nigeria. And so we have gone back into history to look at how Nigerian social environment was created by the empire builders, or what we call social reformers. What we have done so far, we have looked at the role that African ancestors played in creating African ethnicity, identity, and history, religion, culture, and their land and territory. We also look at the role played by Muslims in their development of the same primal social factors of ethnicity, land, religion, and culture. We also look at the role played by the British colonial masters in dealing with our ethnicity, our land, our religion, and our culture. And we also look at Christian missions, how they dealt with our ethnicity, our land, our religion, and our culture. What we didn't have extensive analysis were the nationalists, politicians, and soldiers. We simply just mentioned them in passing because we are dealing with contemporary Nigerian society. And so when we go in the oncoming sessions, we're going to look at the contemporary issues of insecurity, of crisis and conflict in Nigeria. It is at that point that we'll be able to draw much from the nationalists, politicians, and soldiers, what they did to the Nigerian population or Nigerian people regarding their state or what has led to what we are today. And so this evening, we are going to conclude our historical analysis of insecurity, of crisis and conflict in Nigeria. What I would like to begin with, which is a repeat of what I did last week, is to look at the consequences of colonial policies, their administrative practices, and their attitudes towards various ethnic groups in Nigeria. And these patterns that have emerged as a result of colonial administration, their policies and their attitudes, these are the major social aspects that we're going to look at. The first one is the pattern of superiority-inferiority relationship between various ethnic groups in Nigeria. The British colonial masters were able to create a hierarchical structure in Nigeria where they consider some ethnic groups as superior, while other ethnic groups as inferior. So that pattern has been institutionalized into British colonial policies, British governmental administrative practices, and British political attitudes towards the various ethnic groups in Nigeria. The second pattern which emerged from the British colonial administration is the pattern of dominance subordination relationship. There were some ethnic groups that were considered to be dominant, and they were given dominant role to play in Nigerian political scene. So they were the dominant group. While you also have other ethnic groups that were placed under what I call the subordinated group. So you have the pattern of dominance, subordination relationship between ethnic groups. Some were given dominant role to play in the colonial setup, while others were subordinated, placed under the dominance of other ethnic groups. And you can imagine the type of relationships, the attitudes, the values that would come out of these dominant subordination structure that the British had set up. The third is the pattern of politics of inequality, the politics of domination. Inequality is that the Nigerian ethnic groups were not treated equally politically. And so this politics of inequality generated or created certain structures and values that are current today in our society. The other factor is the politics of domination. Politics of domination is that some ethnic groups were dominated by other ethnic groups that were actually said that they were superior, and therefore they were given dominance over others. The other pattern that developed out of British colonial administration is stratified inequality and social hierarchy. Stratified inequality is that the British created a hierarchy of ethnic groups, those on top, those in the middle, and those at the bottom. The British were on top. The other Teutonic races, the European Teutonic races, were below the British. And then the light-skinned Arabs were below. And then in Nigerian context, the Fulani were below the Arabs, and then the Hausa were below the Fulani. And then the remaining ethnic groups in Nigeria were at the bottom. This is what I mean by stratified inequality, the classification of various ethnic groups based upon racial consideration. And as a result of all of this, this has created what I call rivalry and antagonism between ethnic groups. Rivalry. So Nigerian ethnic groups within the Nigerian social context did not see themselves as colleagues or as partners, but they saw themselves as rivals. Okay, rivalry. Who will be on top or who will be at the bottom? Who will be involved in political process or who will be kept out of the political process? And so rivalry and antagonism between ethnic groups was actually generated as a result of that. The other social outcome, sociological outcome, was what I call latent hostility that existed among and also between ethnic groups. You see, resentment. If you are favored better than the rest, of course, the rest that have been designated as inferior, they will not feel happy. and they will develop resentment. And so the ethnic groups, the way the British set up their policies, their administrative practices, and their attitudes generated what I call latent hostility that existed among the various ethnic groups in Nigeria. The next thing that I will want us to consider in terms of the historical roots in trying to understand insecurity, crisis, and conflict in Nigeria. The second aspect is what I will call socio-political issues of contemporary Nigeria, socio-political issues of contemporary Nigeria, which have resulted from what I have just outlined, what the British have done in creating patterns of dominance, patterns of inferiority, and so on and so forth, between and also among various ethnic groups. So these are the result of that. The first one that I would like us to consider is the value conflicts. Conflict of values. You know, when you look at the legacy of the African ancestors, what they have built, and you look at the legacy of the Muslims, and you look at the legacy of the British colonial masters, and the legacy of Christian missions, and all of these legacies have generated what I call value conflicts. I'm not saying that all the values generated by these various legacies are all bad, no. But there are some negative values. And I'll just mention some of the value conflicts resulting from this. The first one is conflict between national values and tribal or group or religious or sub-national values. The values created by the British as Nigerian, or what we call the Nigerian ethical structure, you will find that the values generated by various ethnic groups, by various religious groups, or regional groupings, you will find that their values are at variance with the national ethical structure or national ethical value. And the reason for that is what we have already looked at, the legacies. Each legacy has its own values. And when you put all of them together in trying to develop the same people, we're using various legacies, the end result will be value conflict. And so there is, in contemporary Nigeria today, the conflict between national values, that is the national ethic or the national ethical structure, and the various values generated by various groups. I'll give you an example. The values generated by Boko Haram is entirely in conflict with the Nigerian national ethic. The values generated by the Fulani headsmen totally is in conflict with our national value of national unity, peaceful coexistence. The second area of value conflict is conflict between competing values, such as Western values, Arab values, modern values, and African traditional values. Now, when you have this mix of values, there is a competition. Which value will supersede the others? Which value will be held more important than the others? For example, Nigeria as a nation, for over the years in trying to make or build or create a constitution, has been deviled by value conflict. For example, the current 1999 Constitution of Nigeria has two contradictory values. The Nigerian 99 Constitution was built based upon two ideologies. The ideology of liberal democracy, and then the ideology of Islamic theocracy. Both values were inserted into the 1999 Constitution. It is more or less an expansion of the earlier constitutions, but the 1999 Constitution and its outcome has generated value conflict between liberal democracy and Islamic theocracy. The other value is that of competing and contending cultural, ethnic, religious, or class values and identities. And that is what we're suffering today. For example, the open grazing phenomenon in Nigeria. Now that is, open grazing is a Fulani culture. It's a Fulani value. And Nigerians are opposed to this type of value, open grazing. And that has created value conflict between Nigerians' ethnic groups. In short, you can say Nigeria versus the Fulani ethnic group. The other conflict of values is that conflict of moral and ethical values and patterns of ethnic or regional, political, and religious relationships that are emerging. You see, you find that there are certain values that certain groups in Nigeria hold so dearly, and they want to impose that upon Nigerians. For example, the 2000, after the 1999 Constitution and government of President Olusegun Obasanjo, and then by 2000, then came the Sharia question. And Zamfara State was the first state to declare itself as a Sharia state. And then other states in the north follow suit to declare themselves as Sharia states. Okay. Now, this is an emerging social phenomenon or an emerging social factor that has arisen within the Nigerian social environment. Now, there are many things that have emerged as a result of social dynamics within the Nigerian social environment. And people want to promote their own value, their own structures, or their own culture, or their own ideas. Now, these are the emerging phenomena that is coming up after our political independence from the British in 1960. Let me quickly go to give you a profile of social crisis as a result of what has happened. The legacies, the social reformers, the empire builders have developed the Nigerian social environment. They have tampered with Nigerian ethnicity, Nigerian land, Nigerian religion, and Nigerian culture. Then the consequences of these social changes and social dynamics within the Nigerian social environment, it has generated so many crises. And I will just give you a profile of such crisis, social crisis in Nigeria. The first profile is that of social and cultural issues. There are social and cultural issues that have arisen and are current in the present Nigerian society. What I have done is that I have gone back into history to list some of those social issues. Some of them have come and gone. I'll still mention them, but they featured in our society, even though they have gone, but they were. and they also created their own impact upon the Nigerian social environment. For example, the issues or the questions, the cultural issues, the social issues of ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism simply means tribalism, and primordialism simply means tradition. And so you have tribalism and racism as social issues that have arisen in our Nigerian social environment. The emphasis on ethnicity and the emphasis on tradition. We have that in our society today. The other area is family disintegration. It is a big issue, family disintegration. The Nigerian traditional families are not the same as what we have today. And then we have lots of family disintegration. The other aspect that I like to mention is educational problems. We have educational problems, we have fallen standards, and we have the rising of illiteracy. You see, in modern Nigeria today, you find some groups like Boko Haram who are against education. And you see how many children, how many school children have been chased out of their schools or kidnapped from their schools. The simple reason is they don't want them to be educated. There's a terrible Jahiliya value that Nigerians are still holding on today. We have the neglect of professional ethics. Professional ethics, the best example, you have the police, you have the judiciary. You find that some of these professions, they no longer hold their professional ethics. The other issue is that of problems of urbanization and housing. We are just a few days ago, we have what happened, that building in Lagos. This is a problem of urbanization and housing that Nigerians are facing. And then social tensions, crisis, violence, and conflicts are everywhere in Nigeria today. And you turn to any part of Nigeria, you have social tensions, you have social crisis, you have violence, and you have conflicts here and there. And then you have abuse and misuse of drugs. You find the NDLE, that group that has given the mandate to address the question of substance abuse or drugs in Nigeria. And Nigeria faces this problem of drugs and substance abuse. And then we have the moral, ethical, spiritual, and social problems that are facing Nigeria. If you are conversant with what goes on, particularly the religious groups, the Christian religious group, the Islamic religious groups, if you look inward into this, you will find serious ethical, moral, and spiritual issues confronting our religious system. Corruption and institutional decay. Corruption is not diminishing, but corruption is growing in leaps and bounds in Nigeria. The current regime, that is APC government of Muhammadu Buhari, before they came to power, they promised to deal with corruption in Nigeria. But corruption in Nigeria now is out of hand. You can't even control it. Okay. And I don't think that the government has a way of dealing with corruption and bringing it to an end. There's nothing that they can do. Corruption is growing and growing in leaps and bounds. And then the problem of tribal and cultural politics, and as soon as Nigerians are ready for political elections, these are the futures that will arise. You see, political, tribal consideration and regional consideration This is what comes up. And these are issues that Nigerians are facing. And then discrimination, prejudice, biases, preferential and differential treatment, stereotyping. You find that those who are given the responsibility of holding fort for Nigeria, of dispensing justice to Nigerians, distribution of resources, statuses, and values. Now you'll find that the issues of discrimination, prejudice, biases, preferential and differential treatment, and stereotyping, particularly this regime of APC and Muhammadu Buhari. One of the greatest criticism of this regime is that of nepotism. That is, consideration for your own ethnic group or religious group above all else. And this is a big issue that the current regime has to face or is facing. The other profile, the political issues. I'll just mention some of the things in political issues. The political issues, that is leadership and succession problems in both church and state. I'm sure we are all familiar with crisis. Whenever elections, Nigerians are going to elect whether state governors or houses of assembly, national president, and so on and so forth. Now, crisis comes in because of what? Because the leadership succession. Who is going to lead? Who is going to succeed? And who is going to become the governor or the president? All these issues arise. And then the problem of church-state relationship. Now, this is very big in the northern states, the relationship between the church and the states, particularly in the northern states. Christians have complained about discrimination, about persecution by some of the northern states. And the criticisms and the issues raised, they are in public domain. For you read that in newspapers, in magazines, and so on and so forth. And then the problem of democracy and what I will call, I'll put the word, Hausa word, mulki. Democracy and mulki. I don't know how to define the word mulki, but it simply means that we are in charge, we are in power, and therefore we can do whatever we want to do. So we're going to rule the people, not in a democratic sense, but we're going to rule the people in the sense that we have power, we have authority, we have dominance over them, and we can lord it over to them. So you find in Nigeria, we practice democracy in selecting those who will be in offices. But once they are in offices, they now turn to mulki. Not democratic process, but they turn to mulki. That is, lording it over the people. The other issue is the problem of ethnic genocide. We had civil war between 1967 and January 1970. But after that, the ethnic genocide, you find lots of that in the pockets of the northern states of Nigeria, where some ethnic groups are being killed systematically. The issue, mainly southern part of Kaduna, the plateau, particularly the Irigwe land, Bassa local government, and even the southern, just south, have suffered terribly. Barak and Ladi and other places on plateau. And you can also go to other states and mention the suffering that some of the ethnic groups are facing. And then you have the problem of despotic dictatorship. I've just mentioned that. Despotic dictatorship is that you use a democratic means to gain political power. But once you are now in power, you now turn yourself to become a despot. That is mulki. You install yourself as a ruler, as a monarch, as a king over a democratic process. And then we have the problem of land. It's everywhere. The issue of land in Nigeria is everywhere. The issue of boundaries and the issue of the ownership of land, these are issues that Nigerians are facing today, particularly the ethnic minority groups that are in the middle belt of Nigeria. The question of land. You hear this Fulani herdsmen. You hear a narrative which says that the Fulani herdsmen are fighting with farmers. But this is just a political narrative. But the truth of the matter is not that. The truth of the matter is that foreigners have invaded the ancestral lands that belong to the aborigines, the indigenous groups of people of the area. And what do they do to them? They kill them. And then they occupy their land. And then send the people into what I call IDPs. That is, in the IDPs who are these people who have been displaced. They become refugees in their own country, and which is unfortunate. And then you have the population, the problem of population control. Now, the massive movement of population, especially from the northern parts of Nigeria to the middle belt areas, is phenomenal. And this population growth, or this population movement, generates a lot of social crisis and conflicts within the middle belt areas of Nigeria. And then the other issues, militancy, you have militant groups. First we had the Niger Delta militants, and you have the Boko Haram, Islamic jihadist group. You have the Fulani herdsmen, and now you have the IPOP. These are all militant groups that are rising in the country. And these protest movements, they are a product of the social dynamics of the Nigerian social environment. And if Nigeria does not address them squarely, then these protest movements and militancy will continue to grow. And then the other issue is the economic issues. And Nigeria has many economic issues. I'll just list them. The prevailing poverty and economic decline. Every Nigerian now knows that Nigeria is in a state of economic decline. Nigerians are not growing economy, and Nigerians are not creating an economic viable system. Rather, everything is in the decline. Unemployment is on the rise. There's unemployment everywhere. Graduates don't have jobs. And those who had jobs have been laid off because of industries are falling apart. And some years back, we had what we call Structural Adjustment Program, SAB. And then the other international bodies, IMF and World Bank, their own policies that affected our economic growth and economic status as a nation. And then we have external debts. Now, during Obasanjo period, Obasanjo did his best to reduce the foreign debts of Nigeria to a very minimum. But today, under this regime of APC and Muhammadu Buhari, the external debts are on the rise every day. External debts. Nigeria is borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. And this is like Nigeria is laying a foundation for the oncoming generation that will not be able to do anything because they will spend all their time and life paying back the debts that we have. We have squandered the present and the future, and which is very unfortunate. Now, Nigeria should have become an industrial nation, but we cannot even set up cottage industries, petty industries, because of what? Because Nigerians cannot create economy. And then you have the inability of Nigeria to create wealth and also to distribute wealth. The little proceeds from oil money, how is it distributed equitably throughout the country, Nigeria? And you know that even Nigerians don't know how to distribute the wealth that they have. You have many continue to gather more and more, and while others have less and less. It's unfortunate. And then embezzlement and mismanagement of private and public funds and resources. This is a terrible menace in Nigeria. Just yesterday, Maina, Abdurrahman Maina, who was in charge of pension scheme, and how he embezzled that. And just yesterday or the day before, he was sentenced to 8 years imprisonment. And now Nigerians have their own response to what the laws have done to him. Now, inflated and over-invoiced contracts and projects. This is what you have. Projects, you look at a small project, but you look at the amount of money that was voted for that chaotic project. Some are just ghost projects, and they siphon so much money out of that. And then labor issues and strikes. You have strikes, especially the educational sector. Strike, strike, strike. And medical sector. Strike, strike, strike. Which is unfortunate. Let's move to judicial issues. Nigeria has lots of judicial issues. Problem of human rights and civil liberties. Problem of public accountability. Gender issues, the detention without trials, tortures and mutilation of suspects. Once in a while you see social activists and civil rights groups that talk about disappearing of some people. They talk about how some people are locked up without justice and so on and so forth. You have prison congestions. This is a terrible thing now. Disregard and violation of professional judicial ethics and code of conduct. If you look at the way the present regime, that is APC Muhammadu Buhari government, how they have handled judicial issues, sensitive judicial issues. It is something of great concern to those who are jurists, who understand the law and who understand the procedure of things. It's a great concern. You find the courts will pass a judgment, and then you will find a governor of a state will refuse, or the police or the army will refuse to obey the law, or the government, federal government itself, will refuse to obey the law. And this is what you find in our judicial system. Now, problems, harassment of people, detention, silencing, and imprisonment of human rights and civil liberty. We have the NSAS last year, 2020. What happened to NSAS is a shame, a big shame for our country, Nigeria, to have mishandled the protests or the grievances of young people in this nation. And see the way we have treated our young people. The other issue, the problems of arbitrary state laws. I mean, arbitrary state laws, legislation, state security, and national interests. You just find a state will just wake up and create laws and impose it without due process, and so on and so forth. Laws that are sectional, laws that are private. Private people, this is what we want, and so they set up a kangaroo process, and you have a law. Especially one of them that has caused ripples within the Christian community is karma. And then we can talk about religious issues. We have problem of proselytization or evangelization or propagation, religious propagation, as well as religious propaganda. You have religious fundamentalism, religious militancy, religious violence that is raging in the northeast and in the northwest and in the north central parts of northern Nigeria. You have religious persecution, violation of human rights, and denial of religious liberty. Now, the cases of this going on in some parts of the northern states of Nigeria is phenomenal. You have problems of religious politics and dominance. You have that whether in the social sector or in the private sector, the churches themselves, okay, and you have the issue, the rise of new religions, cults, and occultic practices are of the increase in this country. And then you have other issues I've mentioned, just other issues, for example, like AIDS epidemic. AIDS, we no longer talk about AIDS, but it's still there. Now, COVID-19 has overshadowed that. We have cases of domestic abuse. You have conferences, women conferences in Nigeria. Every conference that the women have set up and address issues in Nigeria, they will talk about domestic abuse, human trafficking, and so on and so forth. Adoption of children, prostitution, abortion, pornography, secret societies, and polygamy, homosexuality. All these are issues that Nigerians are battling with. Now, the last section that I will address, and then we close, is the negative social values. All that I have mentioned, what the social reformers have done, their legacies and their work in creating modern Nigerian social environment. Now, Nigerian society is ridden with these negative social values. Now, let me state it clearly. It doesn't mean that every aspect of Nigeria is negative. No. Not that Nigerians do not have positive values. They do. But I have decided to focus on negative values that generate insecurity, social crisis, and social conflict. And these are the ones that I will just mention. The practices of inequality and injustice abound in our society in Nigeria today. Prescribe inferior, superior statuses and socio-political roles of ethnic tribal groups. What you have is that in Nigeria today, there are certain ethnic groups that have been given the right to be superior over others, while others have been subordinated and they cannot rise above their social classification. Practice of tribal injustice and inequality against certain groups. Tribal injustice and inequality. You'll find that in Nigeria. There's no tribal, there's no ethnic equality in Nigeria. We don't have. Okay. Provisional unequal opportunities to ethnic or tribal religious groups in economic matters, social access, mobility, and recruitment into civil service. All these are very common. In Nigeria now, those who are job seekers, they find it difficult to find jobs. Simple reason is they don't have godfathers that can give them jobs. Okay. Denial of full participation or representation in government, political freedom, equality, and human dignity and rights to certain ethnic and religious groups. If you come to the north, ransack all the northern states, and you will find what I have just stated. The other aspect is the general neglect or failure to develop certain ethnic groups and areas. If you go to some of the northern states, for example, Kaduna State, if you look at all the infrastructure, institutions established, whether federal or state, they have concentrated all of this in one area. And that's all. The southern part has nothing. Okay. This is what I mean, general neglect. Now I can go on, I can mention other stratified inequality and social hierarchy. Nigerian society is highly stratified, highly classified, based on inequality and the hierarchy of your ethnic group. It depends which ethnic group you are. And then we have political and social alienation. Some people, the colonial social order was hardly just and participatory society. It did not seek to maximize participation of all sectors of society and the welfare of all persons or groups, and even development of all groups and areas within the states. At independence, national leaders did not correct these, but even incorporated their pre-colonial traditional values with that of their own colonial masters. I can mention the others, the pattern of ethnic or tribal relation. There's not time for me to go into that. Also the existence of antagonistic communities. You find communities fighting each other. You find religious groups fighting each other, and so on and so forth. Now, with all of this, I call them the negative social values. The problem of Nigeria can be reduced to basically two issues. Number one, Nigeria does not have values. And what I mean by that, Nigeria does not have national ethic or national ethical structure to moderate the attitudes, the behaviors, and the social practices of all Nigerians. Ethnic groups, religious groups, regional groupings, they decide and do what they want. And they come up with their own values and infuse that into Nigeria. And Nigerians have to suffer because of these diversionary, of these conflictual values that all various Nigerian people bring to the Nigerian social environment, and which is a big issue. The other important area of a problem created by Nigeria is that of structures and institutions. What type of structures Nigerians have built, what type of institutions Nigerians have built. Is it for the benefit of Nigeria, or is it for the benefit of certain ethnic group or classes? So the real issue for Nigeria as a nation is that Nigeria needs to work on values. Nigeria needs values that can moderate their attitudes, behavior, and social practices. Thank you for your patience, and see you next week, which will be general discussion with other people. Thank you and good night. Thank you.